Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ann Childers.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to see you. Okay, so I wouldn't call it exactly a mistake, but I sort of like loaded up the slide deck pretty well. Just a second, I think I need to get the clicker. Oh, maybe it's up here. Yay. Oh, good. Here it is. All right, great. So, what I'm going to do, I'm kind of a big overview kind of person, and what I'm going to try to do is give you an overview based on many different disciplines besides my own. I'm a MD. I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist, and I have a different way of running my practice. My practice is basically based on nutrition and sleep. I think that if we get nutrition and sleep dialed in, most people, whatever falls out, probably needs a medication. So that's my philosophy. So I call it lifestyle psychiatry. And these are my conflicts of interest, none. And I'm going to, this reminds me of one of my adolescents. I'm going to take you down my garden path. I remember she told her mother after I talked to her, she was a vegan. And when I got done with her, she wasn't a vegan. And she went to her mother and she said, "Don't let Dr. Childers take you down her garden path. Just don't." Right? So this, I'm going to warn you. So this is my my caution that I'm about to do this. It's my point of view. And I'm going to talk about three things. Humans are carnivores. Eating for dental health enhances physical and mental health. And low carb, high fat is da bomb for both. All right? And physical health as well, but I'm going to go, well, you'll see my garden path. Anyway. All right, so I was a dog trainer for 14 years, and what I learned from dogs just speaks volumes. I saw in the dogs that were ready to learn, shiny coats, bright teeth. These dogs just looked amazing. In fact, their coats were like a fur coat. You could run your hand up the coat, and it would ripple back beautifully. And these dogs were ready to learn. They were calm but alert. In the dogs that were not calm and alert, these were dogs that generally were eating a very bad diet. They were often fearful and tense. You could see a lot of dandruff in the coat, and the coat had an oily, sticky feel to it or was extremely dry. So when I would run my hand up the coat, I would come out with a handful of fur. And I wondered after a few years why we do not look at human beings this way. Why don't we look for shiny eyes, great teeth, great hair, everything in alignment for health? Instead, what we do is we encourage people to use Jergens lotion if their skin is dry, or a certain shampoo if their hair is dull, etc. So basically, you've probably seen this slide a million times, but I'm going to show it to you again. It took us millions of years to get to where we were by 1977 when the new guidelines for eating came out. And it only took 35 years for us to get into terrible shape. Health in the United States is poor. We're among the top ranking countries for percentage of obese persons. We have a problem with private health expenditures, and we're not getting our money's worth. 1 in 6 youth is obese now. And surprisingly, fatty liver disease, which is something that we never saw except in alcoholics, is now not only in adults, but also in children. And nearly 1/2 of American adults is either pre-diabetic or diabetic. So the first guidelines came out in '77, and it was recommended that we increase our carbohydrates from about 42% to 55 to 60%, and this was quite the experiment. We were told to decrease dietary fat. We were told to also decrease cholesterol. And you can see Americans did comply. They did comply. And you can see that there was an effort made in American households to raise the carbohydrates, as was recommended, and to lower the fat. And we thought that that would help us with heart disease. You can also see protein went down slightly. And I think what happened was we started depending on plant sources of protein, which are not so robust. Adults, if you take these two government graphs, one is from the National Center of Health Statistics, and the other one here is from the Nutrition Examination Survey, the NHANES. And you can see if you take these two and you compare, you can see that obesity seems to have started right when the guidelines came out. And you'll see also that it happened in children as well. So one of the things that's very interesting is traditional diets. And what we saw is that in the North Pole areas, where our diet, our refined sugars and starches and things had not reached there, people were pretty robust. And we psychiatrists were fascinated by this. We thought they had some kind of internal strength that got them through 24 hours of night in the winter without seasonal affective disorder or seasonal depression. But 4 years later, we found out that these people were vulnerable. In fact, the prevalence of disability due to mental and behavioral disorders was on the rise. So, of course, we wanted to know what happened. The report, and before our foods reached them, you know, this is kind of their refrigerator. There are no oranges up there. There's no vitamin C, that, you know, in terms of like orange juice, things like that. That's not what they had, especially in winter. This is what happened. So the foods from the Western diet basically reached the northern areas, and people started having problems. So it finally came out that the traditional diets had already led to increased health problems. Obesity, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes came up with mental health problems. We're starting to understand that more now. We're starting to understand how food affects it. But I have to tell you that nutritional psychiatry is currently in its infancy. So how should we eat? So I was a zoology major in college, and I was really curious about how animals ate, especially having had that experience with dogs. Should we be like the omnivore chimpanzee, who gets approximately 10% of its food from meats? Or the vegetarian gorilla, who's definitely on a plant-based diet? Different gut, different diet. Now, one of the things I see constantly is the argument that humans do not have fangs and claws, and therefore we are not carnivores. And yeah, we did have fangs and claws, but we made them out of wood and flint and all kinds of things. We had technology. We had it for millions of years. We had technology, and I'm going to show you a little bit about that. What we ended up doing is 3.4 million years ago eating meat. That's when we started. We were scavenging at that time. And our gut began to evolve with our dietary habits. Different gut, different diet. And you can see this gorilla has a rather large round gut. That is normal for a gorilla, but it is not normal for a human being. This and not this, all right? So this is what we're looking for. So what we've done is over the years, over the decades, we've developed carbohydrate intolerance, and that has led to what we call middle adiposity. In fact, it's thought that probably measuring the waist to hip ratio is a better determination of obesity than the body mass index. And you can see the metabolic syndrome encompasses a wide range of problems. And I would argue that the metabolic syndrome should be called stage 1 diabetes. It's sort of like gum disease before you get into periodontitis, okay? First it's gum disease, and you can deal with that, and maybe you can correct things. But once you've gone on to periodontitis, it's unclear whether that can be cleared up or not. I would argue that a low-carbohydrate diet is definitely good for that situation as well, but I digress. Okay, so relative gut volume, I think this is where the rubber hits the road. If you look at the gibbon, ape, the siamang, the orangutan, the gorilla and chimpanzee, compared to human, what you see is that the relative gut volume, the stomach size related to the abdominal area, is about the same. But look at that small intestine. That small intestine is meant to digest low residue foods, such as meats and their fats. And if you look at the colon, our colon, which is designed or was designed to digest plants and to break down their cellulose walls, that colon is minuscule compared to these other primates. So in the big scheme of things, our GI system is very different. We shouldn't be looking at teeth and claws. What we should be looking at is the function of the gut. So here's another graphic to demonstrate fermentative capacity. There is a certain amount of food that's in fermentative compartments, and fermentation is how cellulose walls break down. So when you pickle, you have pickles in a jar. Those pickles are getting broken down and releasing their nutrients to you. In fact, pickles could well be a superfood, so eat your kimchi. Anyway, so it's great. But what you've done in a jar is what a gorilla can do in his body, but we can't. If you look at cattle, sheep, horse, pig, capybara, guinea pig, rabbit, rat, and then man, cat, dog, our ability to ferment plants is on par with cats and dogs. And I also want to point out that the pig is an omnivore, and so is the rat. All right, so man and man's best friend, which two stomachs are almost exactly alike? There we go. Okay, man and dog. All right, the normal human stomach pH is very low. And you can see on this chart where there are a number of animals listed, down toward the bottom, I've basically lined through so that you can see that the human pH should be normally about 1.5. I think it's come up over the years because of how we eat and because of the medications that we take, but it really should be very acid. And in fact, it is as acid as the animal below it, which is a facultative scavenger. And as I mentioned earlier, we were probably meat scavengers 3.4 million years ago. All right, so humans eat meat. That's what we do. Doesn't mean we can't eat plants. I'm going to talk about that. But basically, we've been eating meat. Lucy was the size of a first grader. She's from Ethiopia. We think she may be in direct lineage of Homo sapiens. We're not sure. However, way back then, she used tools. She had technology. She made this perfectly rectangular shape in bone. She also cracked bone to get to the fatty bone marrow. This is what she may have looked like. And notice that she does not have a large round gut. All right. So human evolution, human brain consumes about 20% of energy at rest, and the other primates approximately 10%. So even at rest, we were burning a lot of energy. And if you look at macronutrients, fat has the highest amount of energy at 9 calories approximately per gram versus protein and carbohydrate at 4 each. So we became bipedal and streamlined. We were suited to daytime persistence hunting. And there's some wonderful YouTube videos on daytime persistence hunting in current hunter-gatherer tribes. It's really wonderful. So about 73% of hunter-gatherers worldwide derived about 55% of their energy from animals. Okay, so in my opinion, we ignore this at our peril. Little has changed since the Paleolithic era, and modern humans have Stone Age bodies. This is a reminder that I better keep going. So sugar. I actually saw this sign in New York. It was the most amazing thing. Candy and discount store for all your needs, right? We have needs, right? And our needs include things like soft drinks and candy. But we are, as a nation, eating way too much sugar, just way too much sugar. I think all of us are aware of that. And refined starches are not considered in this tally. From Dr. David Unwin, I stole this slide from Public Health Consortium in the UK. And I wanted to show you where the unexpected sugar is. You can see basmati rice, which is at the very top. 150 grams serving pours out all of those teaspoons of sugar, and the boiled potato is not far behind. So you can see that we are actually getting an awful lot of sugar from things that are not considered to be added sugars. This is from several years ago, but this was considered to be a week in the lives of an average American family. And you can see it's a sugar fest. You see a little bit of protein up front, but there's crust on the pizza. That's going to turn into glucose. There are chips, fruit juices. I mean, it's all there. It's just basically waves of sugar. So Weston A. Price, I'm going to tell you a tale of two dentists. Weston A. Price is the first dentist that I came across when I was on my own health journey. And he's called the, quote, Charles Darwin of nutrition. And you can read his writings for free online. He wrote Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. He showed that way back, these skulls are about 200 years old. You can see those beautiful broad teeth. Do you see that? Do you see that the third molars have grown in and they are functional? That's incredible. They are beautiful skulls. And these people experienced robust health, and they were living largely on animals. He also went around the world with National Geographic, and you can see his photographs of the Pacific Islanders. Beautiful, beautiful mouths in the group on the left, but on the right is what happened after the foods of commerce, including flours, sugars, vegetable oils, canned goods, came to these people. There were no Stone Age dentists. The Native Americans, which are more current than the Paleolithic era, they basically were able to prepare acorns such that it did not ruin their teeth. This is from a group of Stone Age persons. I guess they were associated with a cave. They may have been starving. That might be why they went for the acorns. And the acorns basically wrecked their teeth. So we have to be really careful with these kinds of foods. We have to know how to properly prepare so that they don't do us in. Philippe Pujol, he's up north of me. I'm in Oregon. He's up in Washington. And he basically was sitting in the airport. He had just read Gary Taub's Good Calories, Bad Calories, and he was eating gummy bears, and he had an aha moment. He realized, oh my gosh, the things that are causing these non-communicable diseases of modern times, such as heart disease, diabetes, all of these things, he said, well, it starts with the teeth. If we just listen to our teeth, we'll know what to eat. And I think no matter what argument you come across, this Food for Thought seminar right now that's online, no matter what expert you talk to, the chief question that I have is, what does your suggested diet do to our teeth? Could we exist on it if we were on a deserted island and we had all of those foods? Would we be okay without a toothbrush or a dentist? So 60% of mortality worldwide is from these chronic non-communicable diseases. Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, dementia, certain cancers, all of them probably related to how we eat. And dental caries and periodontal disease may even be communicable. We may even be able to pass those sorts of things on to one another. That's still under study. First molar caries. Okay, this is what happened in Japan. This is from Pujol's work. This is what happened in Japan when we tried to punish them by taking away their imports. So we were giving them lots of carbohydrates, and we said, okay, we're cutting you off because of World War II. And you can see dental caries or tooth decay went down. Diabetes went down, carbohydrates went down. And then it all resumed once we lifted the embargo. So, tooth decay and gum disease are not just local infections. This is something we need to think about here. Fermentable carbohydrates. Those are carbohydrates that can ferment, such as, grapes. People stomp grapes. There are fermentable carbohydrates in there, and you get wine. People ferment grains, and you get alcohol, you get beer. That's the result of fermentation. And what that does is it reduces the amount of sugar in whatever you started with. So if you eat things that can ferment, they may just ferment in your mouth. They may form acids and actually cause tooth decay. So we're finding periodontal disease, which has a lot of bacteria under the gum, is connected to things like heart disease. And what we're seeing is some periodontal bacteria in arterial plaque. When arteries clog, we're actually finding bacteria in there. We're also finding, it's called a lipopolysaccharide. It's a piece of a bacterial wall. We're finding that in the brains of some people who are demented. So it's also associated with, cause and effect unsure, with diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis. And there is some suspicion that it also promotes premature birth. So it may be setting up inflammation. There's a lot more work to do here. This is what arterial plaque looks like, according to the illustrator, and that's where the bacteria has been found. So, fermentable carbohydrates also tend to be potent fattening carbohydrates. And in fact, this is from 1912 from the Farmer's Encyclopedia of Livestock. Farmers knew a lot about how to eat back then. And in fact, I do believe that back then they were saying, carbohydrates will make you fat. Don't eat starch, makes you fat. Skim milk is one of the most valuable adjuncts of the farm for fattening swine. Okay. Used with corn, Kefir corn, or any of the common grain byproducts. It's a perfect ration for fattening. And basically what we're talking about is I don't know how many Americans do it, but I'm going to guess it's a lot. Cereal and milk. Okay, cereal and skim milk. That's really kind of what we're talking about here. It leaves people hungry, and I'm going to show you why I think that is, but it's amazing. Very good for fattening. And it also looks an awful lot like the 1992 food pyramid. Okay, we've got grains on the bottom, and then you've got, up toward the top, you've got the non-fat dairy. Right. Skim milk, this is what happened to me. I used a continuous glucose monitor. It's a Dexcom G5. No, I don't have the 6 yet. Anyway, it was very helpful for me to see what these things were doing in my body. Now I have type 2 diabetes, so I have to give you that disclaimer. But I've also been at least keto light for about 10 years. So what I did was I went ahead and took just 1/2 cup of skim milk. That's it, just 1/2 cup. And held on to the couch for dear life, because what happened was, as you can see, those are every 5-minute samplings, those little dots, and they were being left behind. There were big gaps in them. That's how fast my blood sugar excursion went. And then I went crashing down. And I was hypoglycemic. I was shaking. Now, I always shake because I have dystonia, but I was shaking, okay? I was shaking. And I was irritable, and I was sweating, and I was mad at my bird for chirping, which is what he's done for the last 17 years, so what's new? Anyway, poor guy. I didn't take it out on him. I knew better, but I was pretty irritable, just saying. So this is what I think part of the magic is. Maybe it's the milk sugars that basically attract the insulin, and you go crashing down. So I think that when brushing and flossing are seldom required to prevent gum disease and tooth decay, overall health improves. A 2003 quote from the Institute of Medicine, you may have seen this many times, but I'll say it again. The lower limit of dietary carbohydrate compatible with life is apparently 0, provided that adequate quantities of protein and fat are consumed. because of gluconeogenesis, in large part. So basically, you can make glucose out of your protein, and that's why. All right, so let's see what protein does and what fat does to blood sugar, and also carbohydrate. This is probably demonstrating a refined carbohydrate, because that's a pretty steep curve right there. But protein also, again, gives us glucose, and it's released at a slower rate. So I think of it like maybe the carbohydrate is like Xanax, and maybe the protein is like diazepam. Anyway, I think like a psychiatrist, but that's kind of how it goes. And the fat is very slow and long releasing. Here's what I think is happening to people, especially in my practice. I get people who say, oh, I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I say, well, how many days do you have this mood shift? And they say, oh, not days, hours. So I have 2 hours of happy, and I have more hours of anxious and depressed, and then I get better, and then I get worse throughout the day. What I think is actually happening is that they are on a high glycemic index diet, and they have to eat as soon as they start hitting rock bottom. And most people won't even wait for that. They'll eat like 6 meals a day, trying to avoid becoming hypoglycemic. So this is what I think is happening. And when I finally talk to them about a low carbohydrate, high fat diet, suddenly they find that they are not hungry all morning, and they can wait until lunch, and sometimes they get down to 2 meals a day, and they're happier and they're more satisfied, and they're not hitting all of these hypoglycemic or subclinical hypoglycemic jags. So all stressed out, every time you hit a hypoglycemic jag, you're pouring out cortisol. So basically, you will have adrenal fatigue. And sometimes it's really hard for me to explain to patients, just change the way you're eating. You don't need any fancy things for adrenal fatigue. Let's see what happens when you actually eat a low carbohydrate diet. And they do get better. High blood glucose and cognition. I actually saw this in my practice. I'm going to show you a continuous glucose monitor reading on this gentleman. But yeah, basically people complain of brain fog. They'll come to me and say, I have brain fog. And it's wonderful how lowering the carbs actually helps that. So I've been using the Abbott Freestyle Libre Pro in addition to the Dexcom. This is one that takes samples every 15 minutes, and you have to use a device to read it. This patient came to me. He was middle-aged, and he was in IT. And he was a very bright gentleman, and he said, I have brain fog. I don't know what to do about it. So I checked him. I always check for sleep. I always check for nutrition. And I said, let's put a continuous glucose monitor on you. And you can see, starting on January 10th and going all the way down to the 17th, you can see that gray line is normal. He's well above. In fact, he got so far above on the 15th, on the 15th, that the monitor couldn't even measure him. It cut off. That's how high it was. So on the 17th in the morning, I talked to him about how to eat. And he's a very technical guy, so he got what I was saying, and he went home and did that. And you can see the next week, starting on January 18th, going on down, you can see that much more normal. And he said, my brain fog is gone. I feel better, doc. Thank you. And he left. So it was a good outcome. This is someone that I was having difficulty with because she remained anxious and depressed, and sometimes for hours and hours. And so when I would give her a questionnaire asking her if she's anxious or depressed, oh yes, every day actually. This is a woman who was taking metformin, and the night before she had, on December 4th, baked goods, caramel and ice cream, basically her holiday treats. And the next day, I was surprised to see this. I don't know if anyone's ever studied this. I did not expect to see 8 hours of hypoglycemia. Now, this is not the kind of hypoglycemia that puts you in the hospital. This woman is a type 2 diabetic. So she's making adequate insulin, But she was miserable throughout that time. And so we had to talk about it, and she began to understand that she was getting a reactive hypoglycemia from some of the things she was eating, and she stopped doing that. So it's great, right? So we want to unsugar the brain. That's what we want to do. The brain doesn't do that well with sugar. Eating fats for heart and brain. I think this is really important. We really are what we eat. And brain is like about 60% fat, about 25% cholesterol. These, when they come from animals that are well treated and well raised, they are health foods. Animal fats and cholesterol. Cholesterol is very important to health. Cholesterol is the foundation for making those steroid hormones, and we all want that. We all want to look good, feel good. We want the shiny hair, the bright eyes. And cholesterol will help you get all that. Nice, moist skin, too. It's great. So cholesterols and fats will help you attain all of that. And you may even be able to throw your Jergens lotion away or whatever you're using. Okay? And it's also important for stress, fertility, inflammation, and sugar stabilization. So ketogenic diet's potential. And here I talk about potential because there are a lot of things that are not fully explored with keto. But we know about diabetes 1 and 2. You've heard a lot about this today, I'm sure. Metabolic syndrome, obesity, epilepsy, that was actually its first known use, was way back in the 1900s. Cancer, Alzheimer's, brain injury, Parkinson's. With epilepsy, it was a different kind of ketogenic diet. It's not the sort of thing that you and I might think about. And actually, there's a modified Atkins that's starting to be looked at. But it was like 90% fat and 10% protein. And there were a lot, in many cases, there were medical foods involved. And so when I read the literature and I see the side effects of a ketogenic diet, I kind of wonder what we're talking about exactly. But there are decades of experience with epileptic children to the present. And I didn't mention, ketogenic diet. Okay, so if you think about ketogenic diet managing epilepsy, and you think about the ketogenic diet as basically helping people when they have epilepsy, not only to get over their epilepsy, but it's also been found it's very good for ADHD in those patients. Okay? So now I'm going to take you a little bit down my garden path. So we also use mood stabilizers for psychiatric problems. And these mood stabilizers are actually anti-epileptic drugs. So my question is, could a ketogenic diet be, in essence, a mood stabilizer? More needs to be done on that, but I wonder. Okay, Alzheimer's dementia is sometimes referred to as type 3 diabetes because there is a type of insulin resistance in the brain, but the insulin doesn't share the same role as it does in the rest of the body. I want to show you what ketones did. You may have heard about Dr. Mary Newport and her husband. Some of you have, I'm sure. And basically, he had a non-ApoE4 Alzheimer's. ApoE4 is basically a genetic predisposition to Alzheimer's. He did not have that, but he had severe Alzheimer's and it was early. And before treatment with coconut oil, which is what she used to promote ketones in his brain, his clock was very disorganized. Psychiatrists often ask people, and neurologists as well, to draw a clock, and then we'll say, draw the clock at 10 to 11. And you folks can probably do that easily, maybe even with your eyes closed. But this gentleman was very disorganized. 14 days after 2 tablespoons of coconut oil a day, you can see that his clock was much better organized. It's pretty exciting. At 37 days, still that improvement. And he had started to interact more with his family, which was lovely to see. So I'm going to just finish up with a few pearls. One, eat pasture butter. eat pasture butter. If you're going to eat pasture butter. And if you don't tolerate butter and you want to have that good fat, you can get ghee. Ghee is a great way to get those oils. And also it'll take a higher fry temp. So, but eat pasture butter. Why pasture? Because omega-3 fatty acids, there's a ratio between omega-3 and omega-6 that's ideal. And that basically is removed in the corn lot. So these animals get far more omega-6, which can be out of balance. It can be very inflammatory, and a whole lot less omega-3, which is anti-inflammatory. And so they're out of balance, and their fats are out of balance as well. So as much as you can, try to get well-raised animals. Eat natural fats. It's really hard to see here, but if you look at lard has a tremendous amount of monounsaturated fat in it. That's amazing, just like olive oil, right? So animals that are well-raised are going to have great percentages of a wide range of fats, and they're going to have the right balance of omega-3 to omega-6. Replace fermentable carbohydrates with proteins, natural fats, cholesterol. Fats and proteins block hunger. Fats promote absorption of vitamins and minerals. Very important. In fact, those beautiful skulls that you saw in the beginning of my presentation may be because of vitamins D, A, K, and E. They may have gotten enough of these gorgeous oil-soluble vitamins that they were able to support their bone health from gestation throughout their lives. Fats also dampen the release of sugar into the bloodstream. This is pretty amazing. I've done several self-experiments with continuous glucose monitors. It's amazing how much it dampens that. And cholesterol, as I mentioned, is the basis of steroid hormones. Yep. So avoid foods that promote tooth decay and gum disease. I think that's a big argument. No matter who you talk to, ask them, well, what's this going to do to our teeth? I think it's a very important question, a very important discussion to have. Eat mostly as if you'll never brush or floss again. Add gelatin. There's a guy, Ray Peat. I like what he writes. I have to say I'm not deep enough into biochemistry to be able to say, oh yes, this is what we need to do. I also have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, so I have a problem with my joints, but I have no joint pain, right? Here I am, older, no joint pain, great. And I think it's because I either get bone broth or I get gelatin every single day. And in some studies, chicken soup was found to be anti-inflammatory for joints. So there's some magic in this that we probably don't know about. Also, red meat may have aspects to it that are difficult for the metabolism without balance of glycine. This is what Ray Peat says. Anyway, I'm not taking any chances. I'm going to have my gelatin. And gelatin is a cooked collagen. Every lion knows awful isn't awful. And this is where we may be eating the wrong part of the animal, right? Do you see how they're going toward the middle? They're getting the most nutritious parts and letting other animals take the rest. So we may be able to take a lesson from this. Organ meats for health, our own health, as well as sustainability, to use more of the animal. By the way, 60% of the protein of the animal is collagen. So getting gelatin and also eating offal, you will basically make these animals stretch further. And for those of you who are squeamish about it, I say bring back sausages, right? Nobody knew what was in them. Anyway. And pay attention to sustainability. Humane ecological approaches mean better nutrition for you. So if that animal is raised right and is in a comfortable setting and he's eating what he was meant to eat, he's going to have the kind of nutrition that you need. And he'll taste better too. Trust me, they taste a lot better. So there have been a lot of models proposed. I like Alan Savory and Joel Salatin, and you can read more about them. Perhaps, and Peter Ballerstedt can also address all of this, so I won't go into it. Three things. Humans are carnivores. Eating for dental health enhances physical and mental health. And low carb, high fat is, am I dating myself? Is the bomb. I'm probably way behind. For dental, physical, and mental health, thank you. Appreciate it.